My name is Amar and I'm Punjabi and I'm a second generation and I work in post-secondary education. I'm a personal trainer and I'm currently enrolled in my master's to make a difference in the BIPOC community around mental health and the stigma around it.
My name is Nérolane. I was born in Ottawa, Ontario. Second generation Canadian. I'm from the Jamaican diaspora.
Hello everyone, my name is Rodney. I'm a second generation immigrant. My father's from Barbados and my mom's from Guyana. My father came here when he was about 19 years old and my mother when she was about 12 or 13.
My name is Vlad, aka Don Ayiti. I am one of the editors at Shift Magazine. I'm a film critic, I'm a journalist, I'm a radio, TV personality, and a traveling journalist as well. I've had the chance to sort of see the different realities that people experience in different walks of life, whether it's in the big cities or the small, more marginalized communities. I am Haitian of origin, second generation Canadian. My parents are Haitian, they're from Haiti, and I consider myself Haitian to the core, and being black is something that I'm definitely proud of, and that, you know, no pun intended, but I wear it on my sleeves.
What I think affects most people in the BIPOC community is the stigma. The stigma is huge. Whether it's within the workplace, whether within the education system, police brutality in the government, whatever spectrum it's coming from, I think the system is not built for people of color, and so we have to work harder. And therefore, when we come to Canada or when we have to work through these challenges, we have to work a lot harder. But I think that's what connects us and makes us stronger and makes us unite and helps us be who we are today.
What do I think most affects the BIPOC communities in Canada? For me personally, I think it's actually police violence. I mean, it's not as prevalent, or maybe it may not be as visible on television like we see in the States, but it's definitely one of the topics that always crosses my mind as a young black man. You know, growing up, my parents always, you know, kind of warned me of things like how I should compose myself when I leave the house. You know, don't wear a hood. Don't wear your do-rag when you leave the house. You know, yes, Mr. Officer, yes, Mrs. Officer, no, Mr. Officer. You know, how to interact with police officers, definitely. And to this day, that's kind of stuck with me, you know. A lot of individuals in the BIPOC community will tell you a similar story of how police presence alone kind of affects how they operate, you know, whether they see a police officer driving by and you're in the car, are you speeding or you're not speeding? You know, always trying to compose yourself, making sure that you always have your driver's license on you, because you just never want to make sure, you always want to make sure that, you know, you're always in the right situation. So police violence for sure, because you always have to think one step ahead, and that can also definitely weigh on your mental process.
Speaking to the mental health in regards to the BIPOC community, I can speak for myself and as a black man. So for myself personally, I found that at least growing up around other people that didn't look like me, you know, I kind of struggled with that. I had identity issues, and at some points I also felt lesser than, because I didn't look like everybody else and I didn't identify with everybody else. So I find that our number one, at least for me, our number one issue is within our own minds, and that we have to get out of the mentality that we are lesser than. We have to get to the place where we are equal to, we are somebody, we're capable of. Even though society may bring us down and may tell us otherwise, and you may see images of other people or images of things that don't look like us, and you know, they may promote other people or races, and you don't see much positivity in the black community. We have to remind ourselves that we can do things. We're capable.
What affects the BIPOC communities the most in Canada, I would say is the stereotypes. You know what I mean? Like, even for me growing up, not knowing what I wanted to do, I just felt like my options were limited, because as a black man, they sort of like they'll put you in categories that are it's like it's compartmentalized. You know, they'll be like, okay, it's either sports or it's this and that. no one talked to me about journalism when I was growing up. I sort of discovered it on the internet. And I just know that where I'm from, especially, most people have no idea, like they don't have these options. They don't think outside the box because, again, especially in the educational system, they push stereotypes upon them. And they feel like in order for, especially when you don't know who you are, when the system's trying to push an identity on you, sometimes you'll embrace it. And that waste, what ends up happening is that it creates a waste of potential for many kids who could maybe find career opportunities in different aspects, maybe in education themselves, you know what I mean? Maybe, you know, becoming scientists, neurosurgeons, or all that kind of stuff. Like there are options outside of what is being presented to them. But as a black man, a lot of time, like because of stereotypes and what they feel like because of where they feel like we should fit the most, they often push. It's like they push an agenda on us that is based on these stereotypes, and it's very hurtful to us as black men.
The way that culture affects mental health within the Punjabi community is we don't talk about it, and we have to put on this perfect image that everything is perfect on the outside, but obviously we're struggling on the inside. And that's within our communities, around the world. We don't talk about mental health, and we have to portray that we live in this perfect family and this perfect image, regardless of whatever challenges that we're dealing with alcoholism, with violence within the home, domestic violence, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stigma that lies within the Sikh community, the South Asian community, that we live these perfect lives, but it's just an image that we're trying to portray to our community. And so I think that people are starting to reclaim their identity by talking about mental health more and more, and we're moving away from that perfect image, perfect family mentality. But obviously it's conversations like this that are gonna help us shy away from painting that perfect picture and really painting a picture of who we really are.
So how does my culture speak with regards to mental health? Being of Jamaican background, my parents are from Jamaica, mental health is not really something that's really brought up in the household, but it mirrors Canadian notions right now too. Mental health is always based on, it's something that's brought upon yourself. You're not mentally tough, you're not mentally strong. And I think that's just a stigma that's just across all platforms, right? So myself also being a former athlete, you hear a lot about that stuff in the change room as well. With regards to my community, I think it's something that's obviously getting better, but I think it's an issue that stems from not just my community, but it's still prevalent today. It's not spoken about enough. And I think once you actually feel some sort of mental health stigma or symptom, then it's easier for you to actually share it with your culture and reach out to other people who might be feeling that way and speak about it like we're doing here today.
In terms of mental health and cultural views in relation to that, growing up, at least from my perspective, as a member of the Black community, the main focus was mostly on education and only certain criteria of education. So I found that there wasn't much talk on the mental health, and I believe that culturally that is where the focus was, right? Move from another country, from the Caribbean, in my case, to North America, Canada, and then the main goal is to get a good education and then get a great job. Very little on the mental health side. So I believe culturally that's how we were pushed. So it's not the forefront, not to say that Black people do not deal with mental health, because, at least for me personally, I did grow up and, there's certain times where I do remember seeing a specialist at time to time for a personal reason, but I don't recall growing up and feeling that mental health was the main topic, right? So especially as Caribbean upbringing, we were taught, especially, your parents like to tell you, especially if you're getting disciplined, I'll give you a reason to cry, you're not supposed to cry. So But we're learning now that, it is okay to cry, and it's something that we need to be able to express, because otherwise we bottle up things, we get angry, we may act out, we may, there might be generational traumas, we may pass this on to the next generation if we don't learn how to deal with certain emotions.
My opinion on intergenerational trauma is it's a very complex and multifaceted concept, and our parents, I've grown up in a family that my dad was an alcoholic and there was domestic abuse in the family, but by no means at all do I ever blame my parents for the trauma that happened within my household. They had the means to deal with their trauma the way that they were able to, and obviously that trauma, through biology, through psychology, and through our social interactions, it is passed down to our children, and it's up to us and our generation to learn and to understand what generational trauma is, and to ensure that our kids and our future generations don't have to deal with those consequences. And so when it comes to intergenerational trauma, it's important that we continue having these conversations, and most importantly, we help ourselves. So we go seek therapy, and we go seek professionals, and we go seek help in order to help us through these, because our parents weren't able to have those resources, and as members of the BIPOC community, it's hard for us to get that type of help because those resources are not always available. But it's important that where we can and when we can, we reach out to the appropriate people in order to ensure that our kids and their kids don't go through what we went through.
What are my thoughts on intergenerational trauma? I mean, it's definitely prevalent, it's a thing, right? So, you hear about the stereotypes as the Black community face, and people joke about it about, for example, Black people, we don't like to swim, we can't swim, right? I was listening to a book the other day, and one of the lines that really caught me was that, our ancestors, when they were on the slave ships coming here, before they died, a lot of them, that the sound of the ocean was the last sound that they actually heard, right? So imagine that, culturally being passed down for the ones that survived, they do have a fear of the water because of what they saw happen to their family or their friends, whoever's on the slave ships, right? So, that intergenerational trauma has now been passed down to their kids saying, okay, well, I can't swim, I'm afraid of the water, I don't want you to learn how to swim. And stuff like that is always passed down generation over generation. And that's why I think some of those traumas still exist today, right? So I use that specific example, but there's definitely a lot more examples that basically strike the same chord.
In terms of mental health and intergenerational trauma, we have to learn to correct that, because, many generations, it was pretty much, you do this, you don't talk back. I mean, talking back's not good, but, you were never given the opportunity to express yourself, right? It was, nope, this is it, you listen to me, and you're gonna do what I say, and that's it. So, and they got that from their parents, and then if you go further back, it even comes down from slavery, right? And it comes all the way from those different generations. But now, as we're learning about mental health, we have to learn to, even though it's hard, even for myself, we need to learn to nurture, we need to learn to listen and to understand the situation, especially if we're dealing with our children. We need to just to listen to them sometimes and have more patience, although it's not in our being to do that. So I'll give you an example of my own personal life. I have two children. I have an 18-year-old son and I have a 6-year-old daughter. So my 18-year-old son, I had him very young. I had him when I was 21 years old. And I used every method I remember my parents would teach me, which was very rough. There wasn't much time for talking. And then 12 years later, I had my daughter. And then I learned that some of the methods I was using wasn't necessarily the best. I'm not saying none of it was good. It was just some of the methods weren't the best. So now I've learned, or I am learning now, to listen, to understand, and I mean, still discipline and still be there, but I am learning to be a little bit different with my daughter. My son tells me, he watches me now and tells me that I'm a little bit soft with my daughter. Now, some may say you're soft because it's your daughter, but no, it's just because I've grown in the 12 years since, from the time he was 1 to 12, and then now from 12 to 18. He's now 18, but now she's 6. So I have grown a lot, and I'm noticing that there's different methods to raising your children than just to, either give them a good spanking or, just being kind of rough with them or shutting them out, right? Because the most important thing, if you didn't get anything from what I just said, the most important thing is building relationships with your kids. Because I found that, I love my parents and I'm now building a great relationship with them now. But the issue is if you're too harsh with them, you may not build that sweet bond with your children. And now as an adult, I'm now trying to recreate those bonds that maybe I didn't have that I would have loved to have had when I was younger. So by changing the style of parenting, you're able to create a nice bond with your children, not just a disciplinary, but you're able to have a bond with them. So if they trust you, you can guide them, right? Instead of rebelling against you once they get to a certain age.
It's something, there's something unfair about the concept of intergenerational trauma. Is the fact that, they say trauma is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility. And what happens is it fair that we have to do the work that our parents and grandparents can't do? No, but you got to realize that we're more than just our ancestors, we're also our descendants, you know what I mean? So generational trauma is one of those things that in order to address it, like we have to make the conscious decision that it has to end with us, whether it's becoming more self-aware, developing emotional intelligence, going to therapy, addressing social issues and all that kind of stuff, educating ourselves on, where we're lacking, where our parents lack and all that kind of stuff, and accepting to take it on ourselves to do better. It's up to us to do better. Is it fair? No, but if we're not going to do it, then what we're going to do, we're just going to push, these types of traumas to the next generations, and then in turn it creates a cycle of never-ending resentment that's been pushed back upon the next generation again. It has to end with us, you know what I mean? And it has to be a conscious effort because it is difficult, you know what I mean? It requires us to move in certain directions. It requires us to forgive people that don't have the ability to apologize. You know what I mean? It requires us to take on, to process pain that's never gonna be validated and all that kind of stuff. But at least that's kind of work that's gonna allow the next generation to actually have a better life. You know what I mean? Ultimately, that's what we want. Our parents want better for us. We want better for our kids. So that's my take on generational trauma.
A piece of advice that I'd like to give to you today is to be vulnerable. I think that we live in such a fast-paced society that we need to slow down and just be aware of our surroundings, and to do that, we have to focus on our mental health. We need to continue having these conversations in order to end the stigma within the BIPOC community and around the world. I look to you to help yourself, seek out a professional, ask for help, understand that you're not alone and that there's people around you that love you. I sit on a board of directors for the Lotus Movement. It's a nonprofit organization that works with the Ottawa community and around the world to end the stigma around mental health within the BIPOC community. I encourage you to visit the website, the Lotus Movement. You can find them on Instagram, and also I do a lot of mental health promotion and talks on my personal page at PreetFit. And as mentioned, I'm doing my master's in counseling psychology, and I hope to make a huge difference in the South Asian community, within the BIPOC community, and around the world. So stay tuned. I'll be the face of mental health and ending the stigma.
If I were to give any tips or tricks or advice to anybody, it would be to reach out to somebody and let them know how you're feeling. Especially if you know somebody in your community who's also feeling the same way, it obviously makes it a lot easier. Be compassionate, be kind to one another, and kind of be understanding as well of everybody's situation, because somebody is going through something. Everybody's going through something, whether they like to show it or not. You can add me up on Instagram. It's Latty, Latty Andrew. I can be a resource for you as well. So feel free, if you want to chat to somebody, you can always reach out to me as well. I also run a athlete mental health not-for-profit called Bench to Bearers, where we're looking at athlete mental health and how we can, find solutions to and create groups to combat this together. So you're not in it alone, we're in it together, and I look forward to chatting with you guys.
I hope you all have, if anything, gained some sort of encouragement from what I've said. You're not alone. I'm not sure what else to say other than that, but I don't know. So you want me to promote a business or something? Hey, okay. So that being said, you know what? We should promote each other and we should uplift each other. So I'm gonna first give a shout out to my boy Al, who did my hair. You can go check him out at Hall of Fades. It's in Canada. So you can go check him out. His name is Mac. So if you go on the website, halloffades.com, I believe, or you can just Google search that. You can check him out. Also, if you're looking for car detailing, I'm just gonna put my own plug out there, in the springtime to fall, you can come check me out, RNA Detailing. So that's www.rnadetailing.ca, or you can check it out on Instagram.
So what tips would I give to people in regards to mental health? Well, one thing that I've discovered is that the most authentic version of yourself is the version of yourself that's happy. So one thing that I like to promote is positivity within our culture, within Black media especially. I'm the creative director of a page on Instagram called The Black Lens, lens with a Z at the end, L-E-Z-N, and L-E-N-Z. And pretty much what we do the promotion of positive Black images that counteract the stereotypical images that we see promoted in mainstream media. So we see Black people graduating, we see Black people becoming doctors, we see Black families celebrating Father's Day and Mother's Day is like in a united front. We see, kind of images that are not as promoted, like, in mainstream culture, like hip hop and all that kind of stuff. I would say also the reason why I'm pushing that as the creative director, as the Black Lens, is because ultimately we become what we consume, you know what I mean? So, in hip hop, the industry, I work in the music industry as well. And in the industry, they like to push stereotypes because these stereotypes sell. And then eventually this becomes like the energy that we embody. So one thing I would say is like, be mindful of what you consume, because that's what you're going to become. And honestly, it's discover the most positive aspect of Black culture, you know what I mean? I also like to push positive Black histories, like learn our history did not start with colonization and slavery and civil rights movement. There's a whole generation of Black ancestors, like emperors and kings and queens and generals and heroes who did amazing things, and some of them we can still see, like the Dogons, we can still see the impact of their influence in the world today, you know what I mean? But that's not going to be promoted in school. So education is another one. Take the time to educate yourself as to what it really means to be Black and what and the richness that really comes from that, you know what I mean? So yeah, those will be my tips.